If this cutscene from Katamari Damacy makes you feel even slightly uncomfortable, good. This game is more than capable of making you feel that way alongside a plethora of other emotions because it's really great at that. It certainly has me feeling some kind of way, otherwise I wouldn't be making an entire video solely talking about why Katamari is one of the most impassioned games I have ever had the pleasure of playing. So please, let me tell you about this very wholesome game. Also, if you had an issue with the way I pronounce the title of this game, oh boy, I am really sorry because that is not changing at all for the rest of the video. Anyway, I'd like to ask you to remember the first time you saw Katamari Damacy. Not necessarily where you were or what you were doing, but more specifically how it made you feel. Witnessing this little insect-sized green guy rolling a ball around a colourful landscape collecting random items and watching how absurd it continued to become as he collected coins and cats and cows. All the while, this wild music that you've never heard in a game before blares in your ears much like it is right now and is probably the sole reason you're still watching this video, as it's certainly not because of my monotone inflection. The soundtrack alone is legendary, but that's only one of the many aspects of this game that make it so memorable. Others might remember it for containing these gorgeous, colourful visuals and having a crazy story and these charming characters that upon release in 2004 had it standing out from anything that the human brain had ever conceived before it. Freaking heck, I'll say that its creativity has still barely been matched. However, I'd be willing to wager most people would remember this game due to its uncanny ability to evoke emotions of unrestrained joy within you. A childlike experience in the best way possible, Katamari is imaginative, pure fun. And while I'm certainly being a little dramatic here, I think that this is the kind of approach this game deserves, as it's admittedly very simple but has all of these previously mentioned aspects working for it with the exaggeration cranked up to 11. And for director Keita Takahashi, I think that was always the intention. How's it going? I'm Paulie, and in this video we'll be putting a magnifying glass to this game and the man behind it, attempting to dissect how an experience like this makes us feel. One that is happiness incarnate and in the year of our Lord 2019 is a much needed dopamine hit. So by all means join me as we observe the emotional roller coaster known as Katamari Damacy. Flawlessly transitioning to our edutainment part of the video, I'd like to introduce you to the mind behind this jubilant PlayStation 2 game. The man I have to thank for essentially putting me in a headlock and spoon-feeding me polygonal pleasure. To understand how he became the radiant force behind one of the jolliest experiences to ever exist, we'll have to go back to 1999. It was here where Takahashi had joined Namco's art department with one of his earliest projects including working on an eventually cancelled game titled Action Drive. Despite this, Takahashi decided to hold on to some of the characters that he'd created at the time that were rejected for the game, being the Prince and the King of Old Cosmos. Combining these characters with the Japanese children's schoolyard game Tamagotchi, where students attempt to roll giant balls around, along with the idea of utilizing perception, the foundations of Katamari Damacy were born. I think it couldn't be more appropriate that even from inception the creation of Katamari was from multiple ideas rolled up into one. However, the ambitious idea was met with immediate pushback from the Namco higher-ups as Takahashi was an artist and not a programmer. So to get his idea off the ground, he gathered young programmers for his game, utilizing students out of Namco's in-house game development school to assist in creating assets for the game, also bringing in some more experienced programmers who had just been laid off from Namco's arcade division. Only given a budget that was around a tenth of what was allocated to Namco's big boy titles such as Soul Calibur and Ridge Racer, the development of Katamari was understandably lacking in support from those in command. Despite these setbacks, Takahashi still remained inspired, the ultimate underdog determined to see out his sole vision. So focused on creating the style of game he wanted, he would even reject advice from Namco to increase its difficulty. In later interviews, Takahashi would state that the team was aiming to hit 4 key points when developing the game: novelty, ease of understanding, enjoyment, and humour. And after playing enough of the final product, you'll begin to understand just how perfectly all of this was implemented into the game, using story, gameplay, and its downright absurd cutscenes to communicate them. The story of Katamari Damacy is simple, and completely void of any sense or logic, but it is fun, and therefore gets the tick of approval from myself, something you'll no doubt soon realise is a bit of a running theme on this channel. Katamari tells the story of the King of All Cosmos, who on a Saturday night with the boys accidentally destroys all of the stars in the sky. Taking zero responsibility for his actions, he then demands that the prince be tasked up with rolling up various items on Earth using his sticky Katamari thing to create giant balls of stuff to be released into the night sky as replacement stars. I found it's just better to not question any of this. As silly as the premise is, the story makes for some wildly entertaining dialogue, as it's here in the opening segments of the game where we are introduced to the relationship between the main characters of the game, the prince and the king of Old Cosmos. To begin describing the king, he is just the worst. At the beginning of all the levels and where you have a time limit to roll everything up, he makes it abundantly clear how little faith he has in the prince, and in turn, you as the player. And should you even slightly underperform, you'll be met by the harshest of criticism despite all of this being a problem he caused in the first place. However, he's so entertainingly rude you can't help but enjoy all the dialogue you have with him, and makes him the perfect contrary to the prince. See, in comparison, the prince does not speak at all. He just keeps his head down and rolls that Katamari, doing as he's told. And oh my goodness, it makes him such a sympathetic character who is just trying to please his father, only concerned with rolling up the ball real nice and big. Despite being mute, the live footage of him that's always in the corner of the screen is super endearing and conveys just as much about how he's feeling as words would, as you see his struggle to try and push this hunk of junk around. I personally enjoy it whenever the Katamari goes underwater and he has this little snorkel. Oh, it's great. He is the unequivocally best boy. However, despite my clear favoritism here, I think they both lend themselves in portraying the good and the bad guys in a story and a game that is completely unconventional. I say this because I think calling the boisterous King of All Cosmos the antagonist of this game would be incorrect. Because really, you're on the same team with the same goal in mind, and while he's undoubtedly a knob, throughout the course of the game, I think the prince, perhaps unknowingly, does a lot more evil than the king does, leaving you unexpectedly feeling a lot worse than what any of the king's berating rants will. Let me explain. See, Katamari Damacy has this secondary plot told through these bizarre cutscenes that play after completing every level, featuring the children of the Hoshino family. The story here being that the son of the Hoshino family is realizing the stars in the sky have disappeared, and none of the grown-ups are believing him. It also features the daughter who is feeling the cosmos every time you replace one of the star sign constellations back into the sky. Whatever that means. Having these within the game creates a unique perspective on what the prince and ultimately you are directly causing, and serves as a good reminder that your actions are having an enormous effect on everyone in this game's world. As does the gameplay, and in particular the later levels of the game when the Katamari, and more specifically the prince, becomes a harbinger of chaos. What I mean is that rolling around the Katamari is a peculiar feeling. It's a power fantasy, but not like the kind you've felt before while playing some action game. What you're doing isn't heroic, it's not even necessarily the morally right thing. Not that you would initially realize, of course, the game is so lighthearted and goofy that your attempts to push this ball around only evoke the most joyous of emotions, meaning you certainly never stop to question anything. But this feeling is there, perhaps in the back of your mind, one you don't want to pay attention to, but is ever present as you roll around the Katamari. Because despite being arguably the happiest game to ever exist, there is this omnipresent sense of brutality that comes to fruition when the prince begins to roll up living creatures. Household cats and dogs, fish and cows, and eventually humans. In the levels where you begin to roll the Katamari into town, the scenario is reminiscent of that of a kaiju movie. Once large enough, the civilians become understandably terrified of the Katamari and will try to run away from it, screaming in the other direction. Police officers will also even stop and fire their weapons at it in a futile attempt to stop the demolition. A sharp contrast from the beginning of the game that had you rolling up pins and erasers on tabletop, creating a Katamari that's final shape is something akin to a failed art project. People who are caught in the Katamari desperately flail about in pointless attempts to escape its clutches. The Katamari no longer being a symbol of how many items you've accumulated in your journey, but rather becoming this living, breathing, grotesque abomination. In the later levels, the Katamari becomes so enormous it seems unstoppable. It no longer remains a game about playing as the prince, and more a mission to feed the insatiable beast. No obstacle too big to be swallowed by its all-encompassing mass. This darker turn is best represented in the final level of the game, where you are tasked with creating a Katamari that's minimum required size is 300 meters. Meaning to succeed, the prince must roll up ships, buildings, and eventually all of the land masses in sight in order to appease the king. The grand finale centers on the destruction of the planet and all life on it, yet throughout the final level the track playing is none other than the game's catchy main theme. A song so good you won't even mind that you're bringing about the apocalypse. It creates this eerie disconnect between the euphoria of the song and this devastation that is occurring at the hand of the prince. A good boy who couldn't appear more innocent and obedient brings about Judgment Day. The final cost of repairing all of the stars in the sky ending up being the lives of all the king's subjects and the planet in which they live. So that was a pretty grim little path we went down. But upon thinking about this finale, the more I feel like it was almost impossible to avoid. A game with such joyous highs would almost have to have these equally bleak lows, a darker message hidden beneath. And whether intentional or not, I thought it was a fantastic representation of, well, life. No one can be that happy all the time, not even Katamari Damacy, and humans have to experience and embrace the good and the bad. And having Katamari emulate that has me holding it and its creator in the highest regard. Because I have some information to reveal to you. Something that probably puts this in a much better perspective. While seeing enough interviews of him researching this video, I couldn't help but notice Keita Takahashi is a sad guy. Or at the very least, one low on self-confidence. In interviews, Takahashi is constantly downplaying his previous attempts to create art. He always has these pessimistic reflections of his games post-release to the point where interviewers have to address it. As it turns out, Katamari Damacy is almost too accurate a reflection of his own life. Creating a game stuffed with such joy, such positivity that you can't help but assume it was created by the human equivalent of a Labrador, but having that same being a tried and true underdog, containing just the darker side that can't help but seep out as you dig deeper. But that's not the only thing to be examined here. See, Katamari is an experience that could have only been achieved through this medium. It contains a message that can also say a lot about our consumerist culture, our desire to collect and obtain, and raises even more questions about whether that urge should be celebrated or critiqued. However, it doesn't pick a side and leaves you to ponder this. And while these cutscenes and gameplay have you asking challenging questions and potentially facing even more challenging emotions, I think none of that stuff can compare to what I consider to be the beating heart of this game. The soundtrack. One of the best of all time, 1 hour, 15 minutes and 14 seconds of refined and unadulterated elation. And yes, I'm willing to have my very first argument in the YouTube comment section on that. That was a bad joke, by the way, please don't. The soundtrack for Katamari Damacy was created by composer/legend Yu Miyake of the later Tekken soundtracks fame. Trying my best to describe this near-perfect soundtrack, Katamari's music is utterly imaginative and unique, featuring songs that utilize electronic compositions with heavy jazz and samba influences, soaring violins, and even goddamn children's choirs. It just about ascends from music and becomes a spiritual experience. It is not capable of containing a dull moment and is infinitely replayable as you can't help but sing along. It almost forces whatever is happening on screen to become an afterthought as you begin to feel like a child being told we're having ice cream every day all the time. Many of the tracks feature vocals from popular J-pop singers such as the lovely and anime voice actors such as Old Mate and Good Old all of which have names that I can confidently pronounce. Miyake has previously stated that he chose the artists by specifically looking for Japanese singers who were well known in Japan but nobody had heard from in a while for whatever reason. Much like Quentin Tarantino would do with his earlier movies with actors. And the songs they all feature in are incredible, some of my favourites on the entire soundtrack. With lyrics mostly containing themes of love and happiness, there happened to be one track amongst these that stood out to me. In an album where every song is the best song, I think one encapsulates the uplifting spirit of Katamari Damacy and what a game like this can do for those who need it. A genuine and very real example of how this game was able to connect with people. So please join me, ladies and gentlemen, as I briefly weave the story behind this incredible tune, detailing the life and hardships of its singer, Kobata Saki, and her triumphant song, Lonely Rolling Star. Our story begins in 1998, where a young up-and-coming supremely talented Kobata Saki is debuting on a Japanese talent search show, hungry for the fame and stardom that will no doubt follow the victor. But unfortunately she was eliminated in the round of 16 finalists. Her career did not begin as she would have anticipated. As a result, there were heartbreakingly no potential record deals that emerged from her experience on the show, despite having an abundance of enthusiasm and obvious vocal talent. Still determined to prove herself, she returned once more in 2001 to the same show, and having improved through sheer hard work, This time she was offered record deals from 4 different companies despite not winning, to which she signed with record label For Life. However, after being promised to be promoted as a solo star upon debut, the company had almost immediately changed their minds and instead chose to utilize her as a front vocalist for a 4-person unit named Clover, as the label didn't want her to be viewed as an idol star. Whilst not ideal, Clover was still able to join together and create their first single, and despite little promotion, the song managed to just scrape into the charts at number 94. Finally finding their synergy, ready to release 3 more singles and eventually an album, the record label suddenly filed for bankruptcy, forcing Saki and her unit to cancel all upcoming projects as they transferred to For Life Music Entertainment, the gap between Saki and her dream beginning to widen. Despite the circumstances, it was here where things actually looked to be on the up for Saki's career, as she was finally being promoted as a solo star that she always wanted to be, releasing the single Fish in 2002. After the positive reception to the release of the single, Saki was able to pursue some voice acting opportunities, live performing, and even had her own internet show, doing whatever possible to garner recognition and refrain from falling into obscurity. However, come the beginning of 2004, where opportunities were finally arriving, Saki's momentum would come to a screeching halt, as close friend Shimizu Kazuhiko, who had a great influence on her activities and someone she had just created a song with, tragically died in a traffic accident in January. The loss so sudden and disastrous, it caused Saki's career to enter an immediate hiatus, their song together never seeing release. When things had just started to go her way, her career had met yet another setback, one so traumatizing it caused Saki to cease the creation of her music for the whole first half of 2004, forcing her to turn down numerous opportunities during her grieving. Opportunities that her career probably couldn't afford to let slip. Nevertheless, during this extremely difficult time in her life, there was but one song she was approached with. The lone song she agreed to record within the entire 6 distressing months, containing lyrics about the loneliness of being apart, but finding it within you to never give up and continue to face forward and go. Kobata Saki had reached within herself to lend her voice to one of the most genuine and emotional performances I've ever heard, honoring her close friend in Lonely Rolling Star. A song that encapsulates the story of never standing still, moving on, and the struggle to survive, knowing that your love will one day return to you. Its themes couldn't have been more personal for her. And playing within a game that never has you stopping to question anything in your ultimate goal to roll up everything, I found this powerful story to be the reason it was completely worth picking up the controller. I consider Katamari Damacy to be art. Having touched so many people in so many different ways, such as Kobata Saki, whose career is now thriving, and myself, who felt passionate enough to ramble on about it in a video for some strangers to watch. And the great thing about this game is that the thing that will resonate with you will be different for everyone. And it's something that I wish Takahashi could realize, because there's something tangible about this game in a way that many other games aren't. And all that's really left is for you to consider climbing aboard, strapping yourself in, and beginning to experience what can only be described as the emotional roller coaster that is Katamari Damacy.